Hey guys, today I want to look at this book, Remembering Muscle Beach, because we know that Steve spent a lot of time at Muscle Beach, and there are some pictures of Steve in here. The author is Harold Zinken, and you might know that name because he was the first Mr. California bodybuilder, and he also started Universal Weight Machines. He said that he didn't want to call it Zinken Weight Machines because, of course, nobody would know what he was talking about, so Universal was just sort of a better accepted name for him. And so Harold Zinken is the author, and he is one of the early pioneers of Muscle Beach. It's a beautiful hard copy book with lots of pictures in it. And what I thought was interesting is that you get to really figure out who, how did Muscle Beach come about? Who was the very first person that credit is given to? Well, it talks about that in this book, and it was a PE teacher, a physical education teacher, whose name escapes me, but she had asked for permission from the city of Santa Monica to work with kids in school on the beach. And so that's where everyone started congregating, and then at that same time you had gymnasts and circus performers and hand balancers who all started to show up as well. And it got to be a really big deal on weekends where you'd have thousands of people travel and watch the platform on Muscle Beach because it was entertaining and it was free entertainment. Prologue with a quote from Joe Gold. The most important thing at Muscle Beach was the friendships we made. Joe Gold, founder of Gold's Gym. There were a lot of pioneers at Muscle Beach. There were, not just circus performers and hand balancers and gymnasts, but there were pre-med students at local colleges. Of course, Harold Zinken, who went on to create the Universal Weight Machine, and Joe Gold, who did Gold's Gym and later on World Gym. So, man, this was, in terms of like music, this was kind of like the 60s and the early 70s when you had all these great bands coming onto the scene and just really all feeding off of each other. Here's a shot of the platform in the early days, Muscle Beach. And here's George Eiferman. He's working with a young girl. It says George Eiferman became Mr. Philadelphia, Mr. America, and Mr. Universe, and he always worked with young people, helping them to be fit. And what's better than that? Here he poses with Beverly Josher, Miss Muscle Beach, 1952. This is Harold Zinken in the center here, and on your left you have Joe Gold, and Harold tells a story about when he and Jack LaLanne first met each other. They had been hearing about each other through the grapevine. Harold Zinken was hearing about Jack LaLanne, and Jack LaLanne was hearing about Harold Zinken. And finally they met, and they both wrestled, so they immediately went into a wrestling match, and according to Jack LaLanne, it lasted about 10 minutes, but according to Harold, it lasted about 20 minutes. So there's a different variation there. There was no winner. They didn't say who the winner was, but Harold said that he would not want to wrestle Jack LaLanne ever again because he just kept coming at him like a vicious dog. There was no quit in Jack LaLanne, and that served him well, obviously, later on in his career, where he set goals, Jack LaLanne, and accomplished them. And, of course, he is one of the most celebrated figures in fitness. Harold gives credit to John Grimmick. Former Mr. Universe John Grimmick was the role model for Muscle Beach regulars. So there you go. That's a pretty broad statement for John Grimmick. In these early pages, there are a lot of pictures of hand balancing. You're going to see Pudgy Stockton and her husband, and you're going to see Jack LaLanne. And this was a family thing where families would come, you know, both the performers and the spectators, and they would come and watch and work up the nerve in a lot of cases to actually get up there and, you know, try to do some of this stuff on the rings or whatnot. Look at that. What a crazy picture. Beautiful. Relna Brewer, that is another big name, early pioneer, poses for a newsreel as she prepares to tear in half a telephone book, Movietone News. Here was just one of the news agencies that frequented Muscle Beach. Alright, well, I'm not going to go through the whole thing out of respect to the author, Harold Zinken, who passed away, but his son is still alive, and apparently they own a family development company out in this area, Santa Monica, California. So his son is still very active. I don't know that he does anything in bodybuilding, but it seems like he's in UFC MMA stuff. All right, so I'm going to skip ahead to Steve Reeves. There's a little bit of a section here. So a little background, if you don't know, Steve graduated high school from Castlemont High School in 1944. And before he went and joined the service in September of 1944, he had the summer, you know, to mess around. So he and a buddy would arrive by bus from Oakland to Muscle Beach. It looks like around 1944 is when he first started going to Muscle Beach, right out of high school, 18 years old. And he made that his home, you know. He lived with Joy, the lady who ran Muscle House by the Sea, I think that's what it was called. And, you know, there's Steve there working on the rings, great shot. Here he is surrounded by admirers, and of course we know this shot right here. So 1944 was around when he first started going to Muscle Beach, and he caused a sensation right off the bat. In 1955, 11 years later, shows you how long, you know, he was active around Muscle Beach. He may have left, you know, to go compete somewhere in bodybuilding. He may have left to go do a musical or a play, but he always returned to Muscle Beach until Hercules, and then he was always making movies in Europe and elsewhere. In 1955, a group of kids were on a blanket at the beach. One of them was Sandra, his first wife. And so Steve arrived, he gets off the bus, he walks down to where these kids are, he recognizes a couple of them, and he sees Sandra for the first time, and he wants to get to know her and spend more time with her. So he looks out at the ocean and says, "Hey, let's all go get in the ocean," or something like that. And everybody gets up and runs, leaving Steve and Sandra there alone. So that was the beginning of their relationship. Anyway, so this is a fantastic book. Lots of bodybuilding, lots of history. If you like to read about, you know, how Muscle Beach started, how it progressed, you're going to recognize a lot of people in here. And look at that. That shows you how popular this place was at the height. And from what I understand, all that's left these days is one of the like balance bars or something like that, and there's a little bitty sign erected paying homage to Muscle Beach. And that's it. So there you go. There is the beginnings of why so many of us, you know, got into physical fitness and bodybuilding. Excellent read. I gave it a thumbs up. Remembering Muscle Beach by Harold Zinken. All right, guys. I will see you next time.